Hey everyone, Brandon Laws here, host of Transform Your Workplace. Today I'm talking with Melanie Tinto, the Chief People Officer at WEX, and Karen Stroup, the Chief Digital Officer at WEX, about how artificial intelligence is shaking up employee benefits and making the world of open enrollment a lot easier and more engaging for employees. We're going to cover how AI tools can help break down jargon, streamline decision making for employees, and ultimately boost employee confidence in their benefits choices. We know how open enrollment can be so complex, and we're talking about how AI is going to transform benefits for employees. Really enjoyed my conversation, a lot of fun. Before we dive in, I want to highlight Xenium HR, our sponsor for the podcast. They offer a range of continuous learning and development programs to fit any team or budget, from on-demand microlearning for just $99 a month for the whole entire company, to deeper virtual workshops and even leadership cohort programs. After you listen to the episode, if you found this episode helpful for you and your organization, please subscribe and share it on LinkedIn or other social media. You're going to help us keep transforming workplaces for employees everywhere. Enjoy the conversation with Melanie Tinto and Karen Stroup of WEX. Karen, Melanie, it is such a pleasure to have you on Transform Your Workplace. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
So, because I have two of you, I want to get you both talking. Melanie, let's start with you. You are the Chief People Officer at WEX. Give me a little insight into your role, your day-to-day, and really what you're focused on right now.
Great. So I have the good fortune of being the Chief People Officer here, as you mentioned, and I am responsible for the 7,500 plus employees here at WEX globally. And that's anything from our benefits to our compensation, talent management, all the facets under the HR umbrella.
Amazing. That's a big job, 7,500 employees. Wow. What's keeping you up at night right now?
Ooh, well, right now we're in the midst of open enrollment, so we are getting through that right now. So that's keeping me up a little bit, just making sure that everyone has full access to their benefits, understanding the benefits, and getting everyone through the process, which is going really well so far.
Excellent. We're going to get into more of the open enrollment stuff, but Karen, I want to turn to you. You are the Chief Digital Officer, and then I was reading more about your role. It sounds like this is a new position in 2022. Tell me a little bit more about your role. Is it more focused on external products, internal, maybe a combination of both, and maybe share some of the things you're working on?
Yeah, so thanks for having us. So I am the Chief Digital Officer at WEX and have been here for almost 3 years now. And it was a newly created role. I think coming out of the pandemic, WEX was looking at how do we unlock the next level of growth? And part of that was the creation of this role. And so I have the opportunity to oversee our product experiences, enabling capabilities, design, data and analytics, and AI, as well as transforming some of our ways of working to help unlock growth and awesome customer experiences. So my job is, I think, incredibly fun. I get to reimagine future experiences, understand where we're going, how market trends are playing out, and what could be in a few years, while also being a steward of our products and experiences in the short term. And so I have a balance of not only our external facing products, but also our internal capabilities that help power those products and create scale, efficiency, and common data flows, among other things.
What was the driving need for your role when it was newly created? Was it like market pressure? Was it like, oh, AI is coming and we need to hop on this fast and we need somebody really smart to come in and like change what we're doing? Like, what was the impetus of that?
I believe the impetus was we wanted to unlock the next phase of growth. And so WEX has 3 different business units. And we have the opportunity to not only leverage the things that have made us successful in the past, but bring in a new perspective and build the capabilities in product and design and take those to the next level, all in service to amplifying our customer experiences and unlocking growth.
Melanie, we were talking about open enrollment a little bit. You're saying that's keeping you up at night. And I think, HR people who are listening will fully agree with you. Open enrollment time is the worst. It does not come without its challenges. What are like those common challenges that you see on the employer, HR side? And then, from an employee's perspective, there's probably some friction as well. So maybe kind of highlight some of the challenges on both sides.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, it starts with making sure that we have the right benefits for our employee base. So we conduct extensive interviews with our employees to understand what's the priorities and needs of our employee base. And then how do we satisfy those needs specifically with the benefits and services that we offer. And in addition, it's also about helping to educate our employees on what those benefits are. So you can have a variety of benefits that are available to your employees, but if they don't understand the magnitude of what's available to them, what the different acronyms mean, how do they actually leverage a life savings account or a flexible spending account or a health savings account, all of that hard work goes to waste when employees don't really understand those facets. And so we really work to try and help employees understand all of the benefits that are at their fingertips, as well as how to utilize those and also access those through the open enrollment process.
What are some of the pitfalls when it comes to like maybe things go wrong and an employee is really frustrated? Like, is it really a lack of knowledge, or is it the technology itself in terms of getting the right plan, the right setup? Like, what are some of those things that come up?
Yeah, I think for the actual open enrollment process itself, it goes quite well from a technology perspective. We have employees asking a lot of questions. We actually use many of our tools through the AI process. We actually have an opportunity for employees to ask chat and get additional information right now for our employee base. So they're able to ask questions around what do certain areas, what do certain elements mean? But the reality is that employees need to take the time to understand all those different facets and what they're signing up for. And it can be overwhelming when you're only doing this once a year, you're touching it. It's a lot of information. It can be complex if you don't understand the fundamental parts. And so many people, either take what I did last year and do I repeat it and not necessarily make a lot of changes, or do I actually go into the system, really dig in to understand all the different facets and comparisons of the different programs and how that actually pertains to their family needs. So it can be challenging from an employee perspective. For us, it's just making sure that employees get access to the best solutions possible for them and their families.
Okay, Karen, you're the technology wizard. How is AI and other technology like transforming this process that Melanie's talking about?
Yeah, just to build on what Melanie was saying, we know that from some previous research that was done, that only 52% of employees feel confident after they finish the enrollment process.
That's startling.
Yeah, half the people don't feel good about the decisions they made or aren't confident that they actually got the coverage, the right providers, put aside the right amount of money that they need for the next year. And only 45% of people know how to use their benefits in the following year. And so from a product and technology perspective, I start from those customer benefits. We want our employees to feel confident in the selection. We want them to use their benefits so that they're healthy, they're happy, they spend more time at work. And from an employer perspective, of course, we want the right mix of benefits. We want to reduce the cost and have the optimal cost profile for the employees. And we want people to use it so that they have more time on the job and are bringing their whole selves to work. So when you put that together, I think that opportunity for AI to transform the benefits enrollment process and the year-round experience is just phenomenal. From designing the plan to benefit selection to in-year usage, we have the opportunity to shift this to personalized, proactive, to have a guide, a healthcare professional, financial advisor in your pocket year round. So I think AI will be very transformative in this space.
Karen, just to add to that, when you think about our employee base or even just studies that are out there, you mentioned some of the studies that were referenced. The average American, I remember reading in social media that they're spending more time on their social media accounts versus open enrollment in terms of their selections. And then if you think about the Gen Zers that are coming in right now as well, when you think about how much time they actually spend 30 minutes or less really understanding the information during open enrollment. And so you look at that and say, did I make the right decisions during open enrollment? Am I going to regret the decisions that I made during open enrollment? And I think it was Amanda Lannert out at Jellyvision. She also talked about how employees actually spend, from a user experience perspective, more time curating and cultivating their Netflix account than they do their healthcare benefit selections. And so if you think about how much time people spend in Netflix compared to benefits, it just shows that it can be overwhelming for employees. And so to Karen's point, just anything we can do to help unpack that and think about simplification, if it's through the utilization of AI, can be incredibly impactful, not only to the employee experience, but also to the wallet. If you think about those wrong errors or choosing the wrong plan, could be as costly as 40-50% increase, which is anything from $200 to $2,500 a year for a family that it could cost if you select the wrong plan.
Karen, I got kind of a two-part question for you. So this technology you're talking about with the AI, like chat and just making sure you have the right plan, getting the right information, is this something you built internally, or is this in the WEX product as of today? And which types of employers, demographic wise, maybe size, are using WEX in all the various services that you have? Just so we have some perspective on what employers are using.
Yeah, so when we think about AI at WEX, I think about it in two different categories. One is AI assistance. So think about an agent or a Gen AI enabled chatbot, if you will. So something that's answering your questions along the way. And the other is personalized advice. And so this could be embedded into the experiences, just providing guidance as you go. And at WEX, we're doing both. And so on the first, which is a Gen AI experience, we have recently launched a benefits admin AI assistant. And so this is putting a new interface on top of an LLM. And I promise not to get too complicated, but what this enables us to do is you've got all the data underneath there, and it just creates that human interaction where you can ask questions and be like, hey, what's my healthcare plan? Is this person covered? Can you remind me if my son is covered for vision insurance? And it creates a conversational workflow that reads and engages with all of that data and just has that back and forth. And so it feels very different from your chatbots of old. And so we just launched this, so it is live with a few of our customers right now, and we're piloting it to understand not only how does the technology work, but also what is the user experience that sits around it. The second piece that we have, which we've had for a while, is creating personalized advice. And so how do you help tee up the right messages to the right customers at the right time to help them optimize their choices? So as an example, you have an HSA, but you haven't invested that dollar. Did you know you're missing out on growth opportunities? And so two different types of AI technology that we use today. And to your second question, we serve employers of all sizes, from very small businesses to extraordinarily large customers, the size of the government, et cetera.
Melanie, I'd love to hear your perspective on just the change involved in these kinds of tools. I mean, I recall when I entered the workforce in 2008, I'm filling out manual paperwork and submitting it to our benefits representative, and then they go and input it into the system, and things are just so vastly different. With this AI, how do you make sure that employees, and we could talk about WEX internal employees, how do you make sure that they feel comfortable and that these tools are now available to them, and really make sure that they feel confident in open enrollment?
Yeah, it's really taking out that complex jargon, to your point. First of all, it's automating it, taking away the paper of old for sure. And so it's a completely automated system that is customized and also remembers what the employees had actually selected last year. So it makes it much easier for them if they want to cut and paste and have the same exact selections as they did in the prior year, that's allowed. There's also that simplification of taking out the jargon, really understanding what employees need in terms of removing the complexities and helping them navigate the benefits with ease. So if you think about empowering an employee to make them feel more informed in the decisions that they're making, and like I mentioned, also having some real-time opportunities to ask questions of our online AI chatbot that helps our employees actually navigate our solutions and our benefit offerings for them. So it feels easier for them. It builds, a little bit of confidence around I'm selecting the right thing. It doesn't feel quite as intimidating, and it also hopefully leads to a higher engagement throughout the process and makes them feel a little bit more comfortable that they're picking the right solutions for themselves and their families. So I feel like we've come a long way, to your point, of the paper and the interoffice mail of old to the online navigation, and really that remembering a bit of that personalized information for that employee and their family, and then what's changed for them and their family that they need to contemplate during that benefits open enrollment process.
And just to add to that, Melanie, so when you think about how does an employee feel about AI in the benefits enrollment process, I would say a lot of times people don't even know when they're using AI. So Melanie talked about Netflix or Amazon. These are experiences that are very much powered by AI, but no one knows it. but they really appreciate the outcomes. I remember one time on Amazon Prime, I got a pop-up saying, Karen, did you know that you've saved over $500 in shipping this year? I was like, no, but I feel really good about my $99 Amazon Prime membership because of that. And I think we can do the same thing, which is employees aren't as concerned about whether it's AI or not AI. What they're concerned about is data that help them feel confident in the decision. So by choosing this plan, you are saving this much money. By making this choice, you avoided these costs. And so AI can help us bring those decisions and the data that they need to make the decisions so they're not as scary and build that confidence.
This is really for both of you, but what's the early feedback on these new tools? Are employees loving it? And it probably reduces a lot of pressure on your team, especially you, Melanie, on you probably have benefits people and HR people who are constantly answering questions of employees. Yeah, just tell me what the early feedback is.
Couple things. First of all, for open enrollment, we've already been receiving chats to say how much easier it is for them to navigate and get answers readily for their own decision-making process, which has been great to see some of those notes coming in. The other is we actually implemented more of this in our shared services center early in the year, and we've had over 10,000 requests through that process where we're having self-service enabled solutions and answers for our employees. So I would say, AI definitely is playing a huge role. To Karen's point, they're not necessarily thinking about it as, oh, this is an AI-driven decision. It's really around getting ready, fast access to answers for their questions so that they don't have to call a specific individual to get those answers.
To build on that, I'll say, I actually think working in an ops center or the call center has to be one of the hardest jobs there is. Like, can you imagine someone calling in and asking a question and you're trying to find the answer? And so people are worried about AI taking their job away, but I actually think about it in the opposite, which is AI can make your job better. It takes out the mundane things, the things that cause stress and friction and elapsed time to create better experiences and to make you better at your job. We hear that feedback from employees when we're powering them with the right data to do their job better. And from the AI perspective and the employee perspective, we've learned a couple of things. The first is we can quantitatively see that we do a better job answering the questions using this large language model. And so statistically, we know that we're answering the questions with more accuracy, which feels really, really good. The opportunity that we've discovered is it's not just about the data, but it's about the customer experience. And so I think everyone's had lots of experience with chatbots over the last decade, and they're generally not great. And so part of what we're trying to retrain and educate people on is this isn't your chatbot of old. Like, it's not going to be a bad experience. Like, give us another shot to do this in a different way. And the more they're ubiquitous in the industry, the more that will be the expectation. But we're changing expectations now at the early stage of the journey. And so we're learning on how do we bring that benefit up front so we get people to give this chat experience another shot.
That's such a great point you're making, Karen, because I think as this becomes ubiquitous, I think a lot of employers are going to just naturally adopt this. But, you're 7,500 employees, you're a large organization. Many, small organizations that are probably listening to this podcast today don't have a Melanie and don't have a Karen. How do you recognize that there's a need for this technology and then get buy-in from leadership and then eventually cascade it through the organization? It seems like such a huge hurdle. I don't know who wants to answer that. Maybe both of you can jump in, but this seems like a big hurdle to come over.
Yeah, so Karen, you and I have been partnering on this journey together around not only educating our employees on how to use AI, how to become familiar with and understand AI. And so Karen and I have been joined at the hip to really help educate. And actually, we've seen the impact of it. As you educate employees, you see a marked improvement in how employees feel about the ability for them to actually either create efficiency or feel more comfortable with the technology and really understand the underpinnings of it, which is huge. And then you're starting to see where employees are understanding there's a whole lot more that they actually can have access to in terms of whether it's how they answer questions related to communications when they're thinking about prepping for something. So they're starting to use it much more readily. And Karen, I think about the conversation we had at the ELT meeting where you said, I'm looking at it at least when we started, at least 3 times a day, I'm going out and using some type of AI-driven tool to really teach myself to get used to those tools. And she challenged all of us at the ELT to do that. And we actually did the same with our teams as well. So we went and said, let's actually embark on this. I have found that I have been increasingly much more effective by using some of even the fundamental AI tools, whether that's Gemini or others, to really help either think about crafting communications, different areas that I have questions about in terms of how might I structure something, what's a new policy coming out in a state, and what does AI have that's creating some initial knowledge for me. And so it's a hugely valuable tool that really unlocks a lot more effectiveness and efficiency if you use it as kind of a co-pilot, if you will, or a partner, if you will, along the way to really drive a much more improved return on investment, both with the partnership of a human and then also just this added extra resource from a technology perspective. And so, Karen, I'm sure you have stories too. You've done a lot in this space, but it's really been a fun journey through the last year.
Yeah, so that was a great answer, Melanie, and very, very accurately describes our journey. We started by declaring 3 bold goals for WEX for this year. One was to drive productivity. The second was to reimagine our experiences with AI. And the third was to educate all of our employees with the goal of them feeling inspired by AI and not scared of it. And so I think it starts with goals. Someone having the courage to put a stake in the ground of, we recognize that this is going to change the way we work and we want to lean into it and figure it out. And we'll meet most of the goals. Some have gone in different directions than we expected, but we made a lot more progress by having those goals than not. It creates a level of accountability. The second thing I'll say is this is habit change. We all are creatures of habit. It's like, if you say, I'm going to drink water every day and exercise, they say it takes 3 weeks to create a habit. And so that's what we challenged ourselves to do. And I challenged myself to do. Every day, I am going to make sure that 3 or 5 times a day, I use the tools. And I don't think you need a private instance to use a tool. And so just 2 examples of things that I've done this week. One is from an interview perspective. I had to interview someone. I loaded the resume into, in this case, I use Claude. Said, what questions would you ask? And then we agreed on what the criteria were. And then I said, hey, here's a resume of someone. What questions should I ask this person? And it not only gave me feedback on the person, but it gave me green flags and red flags, like things you should be worried about and things that you should feel great about. It was spot on. It made my interview so much better. The second example I would give is I was actually using Gen AI to reimagine the way we do our work. And so I went in and said, hey, how do I get 10% productivity out of product marketing, and did a series of questions. It's able to say, like, here are the key functions. Here's how much time they spend in a month. Here's an opportunity. Here's how much time you could save with AI, and high, medium, low, how hard is it to do it? And so instead of using AI, or in addition to using AI in your daily work, you can use it to actually drive the transformation too, because it has a lot of great best practices. So my advice is get started.
Karen, to your point, it's so much easier to be able to start to put questions into a prompt, and rather than looking at that blank sheet of paper that we used to look at, right? So starting with, hey, I have this presentation that I need to create. Here's the context of the presentation. What are some of the key areas that I want to focus on? And even this week for me, it was, hey, I need to have a challenging conversation with someone about a particular topic. How might I think about structuring that conversation? And so it really walked you through how to lead with empathy, how to think about structuring that conversation, what the setting should be in that conversation. And so again, it's really about checking your knowledge, but also making you even better by saying, oh my gosh, I hadn't thought about that. I really should structure it in a different way to really make sure that it's thoughtful and understand where that employee is coming from. And so it just makes a huge difference of just that, again, that second area of focus and the ability to ask it some questions to make you be more reflective in your decisions or your presentations or your conversations.
What's wild too is you could take it a step further, like with ChatGPT, the mobile app, the voice mode. If you pay for the subscription, you could have a full-on role play with it. I actually took a walk yesterday up the hill. I just need to stretch my legs. I sit at my desk all day, and I had a full conversation in voice mode, just prepping for a training that I'm going to deliver. And it gave me some more ideas and some structure to it. It's an incredible experience. And imagine if this cascades down to the end user stuff, like with what we're talking about with benefits, open enrollment, and like just being able to chat with it. And it's incredible what's coming.
And one thing that I find really interesting is right now, there's a stat that says men are using Gen AI tools 20% more than women.
Yep, I saw this.
And I think it's such a fascinating statistic, one that we can do something about, not only in the workplace, but I'm thinking about it with my kids. I have two boys and a daughter, and my oldest son really leans into it, and my 14-year-old daughter, I'm training her on how do you start to think in a different way and use AI to be that co-pilot for her in the way my older son is naturally doing. Now, they're very different kids, but I'm not sure the school would appreciate this, but I think that in 4 or 5 years, it's going to be how people work. And so, but it does require a different way of thinking and a different way of prompting and unlocking the questions. And so I'm getting started early.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And hearing both of you talk, you are in lockstep. It's interesting to hear like what Melanie was talking about, like clearly using all the tools and pushing herself. I'm sure it was hard at first, but Karen, that definitely means that you're making change inside your organization, have alignment across the entire executive team. So you're doing something right.
Well, I appreciate that. One of the things that Melanie's actually done a great job of pushing us on is having shared goals. And so we have a fewer number of goals, but they're shared across the ELT and then cascade down the organization. And that really helps us understand what's important and have the consistency and the forums to talk about those things. Those are the topics that we bring into our different executive leadership team conversations we goal ourselves on, and therefore we win or lose together. So I think it starts from a culture and
We
alignment.
spend a lot of time together.
That's fantastic. Even in different time zones, you're still able to spend a lot of time together. That's great. So, Karen, I want you to give me some advice here. So, I work inside of a 100-person company, and technology, even though I'm a marketer, technology usually lands on me, especially with like significant changes. I actually am giving an AI training or an AI talk, like an hour-long presentation that I'm going to give to all the HR staff. We have about 30 consultants. What do you recommend I tell them? Like, and how should I structure it? And because the reason I'm asking this is there's probably a lot of people listening who want to make change inside their organization. And it starts at a baseline understanding of the why. What are the core components to this session that I should put together?
Oh, great question. And way to put me on the spot. So I would say a couple of things. First of all, I think that AI feels like an intimidating topic. And even when you talk about things like prompt engineering, it's intimidating. But it's not engineering. It's actually kind of what we do every day. So my first piece of advice is make it approachable and make it fun. My second is to create a call to action. I think a lot of people feel like AI is going to take their job, but the reality is it's probably someone who uses AI well that will take their job. That's a common refrain that's going around. And so I want to be on the side of the person who's using AI so that I accelerate my career. And so as I think about it, what I've seen through our trainings is, one, using real world examples that are relevant to that audience. If you're talking to HR, how do you make it feel specific to HR? Are there stories within your company of someone who has done a really great job at using this and they've saved time? I think that when you hear the stories about the Amazons or Googles of the world, it feels like it's them versus us. And so I try to tell stories of us. And the last thing that I found really successful is actually to do hands-on keyboard. So instead of just talking about it, like pull it out, use that real world example, and let's do it. Who's writing a good prompt? How do you make a prompt better? How do you have a role? How do you provide the context? How do you iterate on it? What we've seen be most successful is when people actually do it. And then finally end with a commitment. What are you going to do differently in the next week because of this?
Great advice. Melanie, I want to turn to you real quick. Now that you're using some of these tools, have you started to think about how you're going to structure your team in the future? And I don't want to put you on the spot necessarily and say some things that you're not really prepared to say, but I imagine you're probably rethinking like, wow, some of these tools save and probably reduce pressure on my team. Now they can do something else or do more of something that's a higher and better use of their time. How are you thinking about that?
Thanks for the question. It's a little bit like building on what Karen was talking about in terms of taking the AI and really making our team more knowledgeable. So we've actually been doing a series of trainings to help people understand the efficiency and effectiveness and how they can apply it in their jobs. And we actually, in our recent session that we did, we actually worked on taking a policy and how you actually could simplify it by using AI. So it's taking the AI and really also taking the human ingenuity to change what the output is. And so if you think about the structure of the team, especially if you start with, say, talent acquisition, there's lots of places that we can use AI to actually create capacity to focus on the things that we actually want to focus on. And so what do I mean by that? It's care and feeding of our employees. It's care and feeding for movement across the organization. It's care and feeding for our prospective hires across the board, versus scheduling interviews, versus thinking about crafting job descriptions, versus thinking about things like candidate sourcing. Are there different ways and tools that we can use to get a much broader cross-section of talent for our jobs, really in the vein of helping to accelerate finding candidates as quickly as possible for the business? Because that's the job we have, is quality candidates at the right time with the right skills and capabilities that are for our managers and leaders like Karen and others. And so that's one of the key areas. It's also about simplification of things that I think used to take us like weeks or days or hours of time. And when I think about that, it's policy simplification or writing a policy and where you start. That's been a hugely effective opportunity. It's the chatbots and answering the questions for employees that I mentioned before. And then it's also really thinking about ways in which we can structure our presentations, or even if we have to automate data analytics. So do we need to pull a series of information, again, that used to take us hours, that now can automatically populate? In fact, we had one that used to take us 16 hours, and now takes us 30 seconds. And so if you think about that quality of time that we're getting back to actually either reinvest in ourselves on development, or reinvest in our customers and be able to really create a product-centric HR organization. That's what we're trying to do. And that looks very, very different than the HR answer the phones, the HR of old. So it's much more of a consultative, product-forward, customer-centric organization.
What a fun discussion. I mean, I could talk to you both all day. There's so much more to cover. I want to have you back like next year or something to see how things have changed, progressed, and maybe you've built something else. But I just appreciate both of you for coming on the podcast. Melanie, let's start with you. Like, where's the best way to connect with you or learn more about your work, and anything else you want to share?
Sure. So always happy to connect. So thank you, Brittany. This has been a lot of fun, and it's always fun to partner with Karen. So I'm excited to be on here today with her. Through LinkedIn is great. I am an active user of LinkedIn, and so feel free to look me up. I'm happy to connect with others that want to learn more or just share ideas. And then I'm also always happy to brainstorm ideas as well. So looking forward to that, Brandon.
And Karen, what's the best place to connect with you?
Yeah, same. I'm also active on LinkedIn, so please reach out, and happy to talk anytime. And we'd be happy to come back, Brandon. This was very fun.
Fantastic. Karen, Melanie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in for today's episode of Transform Your Workplace. The content on this show is strictly for general information and educational purposes only, so that you can go transform your workplace in a positive way. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on the show are the guest's own and don't represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of either Xenium HR, the sponsor of the show, or me, the host, Brandon Laws. Additionally, Xenium HR or myself, Brandon Laws, doesn't endorse any guest, their business, or any organization they represent, so discretion is advised. We encourage you to work with a trusted advisor to find a custom approach that fits your organization's needs. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode.